Welcome to the Russo-Files. My name is Donald Barry, and I'm an American fighting back against Russian influence in American politics and culture. So, this is episode one. This is 2 days out from the election. And like many people on my side of the aisle, um, I'm still in shock and disbelief that, in 2024, after January 6th, after all of the gross things that Donald Trump did and said on the campaign trail, after the Madison Square Garden event, that not only did he win the Electoral College, but a majority of Americans voted for him for the first time. And so this channel is a form of political protest for me. If you feel the same, please do like, comment, and subscribe. I'm going to do my best on this channel to connect the dots. This is probably something I should have done a long time ago. But the Russians aren't coming. The Russians are already here. And it's been, in front of our faces, under our noses the entire time. So I'm going to do what I can in whatever small way that I have available to me to begin to track this, to begin to connect the dots. So I'm going to go on record and accuse a lot of people of being more than useful idiots, of being paid Russian agents. And I'll start with Tulsi Gabbard. I've been following the Ukraine war since day one, and that would go, back to February of 2022 for sure. But going back to the Maidan Revolution, going back to the Orange Revolution of the mid 2000s, I've been following Ukraine and supporting in whatever way I could their resistance of Russian tyranny. So when early on in the Ukraine war, I saw this short from Tulsi Gabbard, I said this to my friends. I said, she should be charged with treason. Now, I know we live in a country with a strong First Amendment, and I support that. But we're going to have to start to figure out what the morality and what the law structure is around being paid to do the bidding of a foreign government, especially a foreign government as, flat out evil as the Russians. And so this is from the beginning of the Ukraine war. It says down here 2 years ago. Sometimes they'll give you the exact date, but this is right when the troops were rolling in. And I'm going to let this play, and I just want you to hear what Tulsi Gabbard had to say, how smug she is, and then I'm going to do my best to debunk what she said.
Now, here's something you are not going to hear on the mainstream media. What you do hear is warmongers arguing that we must protect Ukraine because it is a quote-unquote democracy. But they're lying. Ukraine isn't actually a democracy. For example, to hold on to power, Ukraine's president shut down the 3 TV stations that were openly criticizing him and his policies, imprisoned the head of the opposition political party that had come in second place in their elections, and went and arrested and jailed that party's leaders. This is exactly what Putin has been accused of doing. But Ukraine did this all with the support of the United States. What you do hear is warmongers arguing that we must protect Ukraine because it is a quote-unquote democracy.
All right, so anybody who supports Ukraine is now a warmonger, even though she's paid a contributor on Fox News, and nobody's been a greater warmonger since the 90s than Fox News.
They're lying. Ukraine isn't actually a democracy.
Actually, it is. They have free and fair elections. They elected Zelensky.
For example, to hold on to power, Ukraine's president shut down the 3 TV stations that were openly criticizing him and his policies,
These are three TV stations with direct connections to Russia, who is bombing them, who is bombing maternity wards, who is kidnapping tens of thousands of children, who is responsible for the atrocities of Bucha, and who has set up torture sites in every city that they've taken over.
Imprisoned the head of the opposition political party that had come in second place in their elections.
Now, notice how she doesn't give any names, so it's hard to look up, but I looked up who she's talking about, and this is Petro Poroshenko, and all he was forced to do was sell his assets, and he was given not even house arrest. He's just not allowed to leave the nation.
And went and arrested and jailed that party's leaders. This is exactly what Putin has been accused of doing.
Now, notice how she said, this is exactly what Putin has been accused of doing, which is different from saying this is what Putin has done. And so she's not even willing to point the finger at Putin. She's just, oh, those are just allegations. But second, that's not what Putin has been accused of doing. Putin has been accused of shooting his political opponents in the back, throwing them out of windows, poisoning them, arresting them, and sending them to Siberia. So that's as false an equivalency as you can get.
But Ukraine did this all with the support of the United States.
All with the support of the United States, right? Because we want to support a democracy, because we want to support a country that gave up their nuclear weapons in a deal that we brokered and offered them security assurances for, a country that is fighting the greatest evil on the planet, a man who has abducted at least 20,000 children. And I was watching an interview with somebody who's on the ground and does humanitarian work in Ukraine. And he said that 20,000 is the number that they have with kids who have records. It could be as high as 500,000. So this is Tulsi Gabbard. Sounds compromised to me. And here, and this is where I'm going to do my best to connect the dots for people. This really disturbed me. This is from a year ago, but almost 2 years ago at this point. Let's see, it's February 16th, 2023. So Jordan Peterson has 8 million subscribers. So he has huge reach. And he's platforming Tulsi Gabbard. And he's, the consummate psychologist. He understands the human mind. He knows the questions to ask, but he doesn't ask the questions in this interview. He platforms Tulsi Gabbard and allows her to frame herself as pushing back against the war hawks, pushing back against the warmongers. She is on Fox News, right? She claims that she got her distaste for the military industrial complex from her time in Iraq. And so now she's speaking truth to power. But she's a paid contributor on Fox News. And nobody was a greater warmonger for the Iraq war than Fox News was. Does he ask her that? No. And there's a point in here where they sort of laugh at each other about how corrupt Ukraine is without mentioning at all the corruption of Russia. And so you can see people's true intentions by their false equivalencies and what they're not willing to talk about. If you want to have a principled stand on America being non-interventionist, America not being the world's police. If you want to have a principled stand on corruption in Ukraine, that's fine. But you damn well better call out the corruption in Russia. And if you're not, I have to question what your intentions are. And so here it is. The true date of this podcast, this interview is February 16th, 2023. And let me show you what happened just a few days later. So that was February 16th. And this is a pro-Russia rally in DC put together by Tulsi Gabbard and other Russian assets in American politics, February 19th. Several hundred protesters gathered in Washington on Sunday to oppose continued U.S. support for Ukraine as it fights off Russian aggression, as it fights off Russia bombing maternity wards, as it fights off Russia setting up torture chambers in every village that they take over, as they support Ukraine in fighting off having tens of thousands of their children kidnapped. The event, which was billed as March Against the War Machine Rally, right? Who's got the war machine and who's using it? This is a quote. This proxy war that we are fighting against Russia right now could turn at any moment into a direct conflict between the United States and NATO and Russia, a country that has more nuclear weapons than any other in the world, said former Rep. Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii, parroting Russian talking points, doing Russia's bidding, reminding the world how dangerous it is. It's a nuclear power. You just let them commit whatever atrocities they want to commit. Let's be cowards on our side of the ocean and just let people who all they want to do is join the European Union. All they've done is elect an idealistic Jewish TV star. All they want to do is turn away from the corruption and the repression of the Russian system. But hey, supporting that means you're a warmonger, according to Russian asset Tulsi Gabbard. Okay, so get this as a characterization of the rally organizers. Apart from opposing further U.S. financial support for Ukraine, the rally's organizers and speakers argued for slashing the Pentagon budget, disbanding NATO, abolishing the CIA, and freeing Julian Assange. Sounds like a Putin wish list to me. The focus largely remained on Ukraine, however, as exhibited by Ms. Gabbard's former House colleagues, Texas Republican Ron Paul and Ohio Democrat Dennis Kucinich. So this is one of these situations where the far right and the far left come around and meet in the middle. Mr. Kucinich, meanwhile, accused Mr. Biden of having bombed the Nord Stream 2 natural gas pipeline between Russia and Germany. We will not rest until you are held accountable by Congress, by the International Criminal Court, and by the American people at the next election. Well, I guess they've spoken. But here's that false equivalency. How can you give a fuck about the Nord Stream 2 natural gas pipeline when the Russians are bombing maternity wards? Most of the other speakers at the event were professional activists, some of whom have worked as contributors or hosts for Kremlin-controlled RT America. That's Russian Today. That's is their news outlet and was on our cable TV and all over YouTube. So you're wondering why Zelensky would shutter three television stations in Ukraine. It's because they're direct arms of the Kremlin, the direct arms of Putin. I see the Russian flags out there, said Tara Reid, a one-time RT contributor who accused Mr. Biden of sexual assault during the 2020 campaign. Remember that? How bad a liar she was? And everybody just moved on because we realized within 2-3 days that she was just lying out of her ass. She's part of this. And so here's the connection, right? This is February 19th. And on February 16th, she's on Jordan Peterson's podcast. And so the question is, who's doing the scheduling? The question is, who has whose number, right? Who's in whose Rolodex? And so one of the foremost conservative voices in America, in the West, Jordan Peterson, has this well-timed interview with Tulsi Gabbard, who then goes on the steps in DC to promote Russia over Ukraine. And why is Jordan Peterson platforming her just a few days before? This is coordination. This is collusion. This is the Russians influencing us behind these podcasters. And, Tim Pool and the rest of Tenant Media have already been caught receiving $5 million, $10 million total to Tenant Media. They have names, they have bank accounts. Nobody's even denying that it happened. And so Jordan Peterson is part of this. He's getting paid off. And so here you have Rescue the Republic, which was in DC just a month ago. And this is a list of the compromise. This is a list of willing Russian agents. I'm sorry. Robert Kennedy Jr., one of his first political ads was geolocated to a Russian street. It was Russians that created a political ad for him. These are people that are killing millions of innocent Ukrainians and hundreds of thousands of essentially innocent Russian soldiers. These are ethnic minorities that are literally being thrown into a literal meat grinder. And Robert Kennedy Jr. is going to willingly accept their help in politics. It just blows my mind that people don't see this. You got Russell Brand, he's been against Ukraine from the start. You got Jordan Peterson in collusion with Tulsi Gabbard. You got Brett Weinstein. There's Tulsi Gabbard. You got Jimmy Dore, who's one of these lefties who's bought out too. And then you've got Matt Taibbi. And so this is an interview between Taibbi and Peterson. And this is how they've got both sides, right? Taibbi, Jimmy Dore, others would be considered leftists, Dennis Kucinich. But they all worked, closely with Russia, Russia Today, that sort of thing at some point. And during this interview between Jordan Peterson and Matt Taibbi, they laugh about the Nazis, or they take very seriously the Nazi connection in Ukraine, right? That's part of Russia's uh, justification for the war, is that the Ukrainians have Nazis. Now, number one, every country has Nazis. We have Nazis. Anybody remember Charlottesville? Right? There were Nazis that stormed the Capitol on January 6th. The Nazis were fighting against the Russians, and the Russians were responsible for the Holodomor, which was an enforced famine on the Ukrainians in the 30s, in which maybe as many as 10 million people died. Millions of people died, were starved to death. Now, you might forgive somebody for being, my enemy's enemy is my friend. But they both owe the Nazis in Ukraine. Here's my challenge to that. Name me the Ukrainian atrocity. Name me the Ukrainian atrocity. I can name you tons of Russian atrocities, just the whole invasion, Bucha, all of the torture sites, the prisoners of war coming back emaciated and permanently traumatized, the bombings of maternity wards. And this summer, Children's Hospital hit as Russian strikes killed dozens in Ukraine. So an Iskander missile sent intentionally into a children's hospital. How come none of these how come none of these people are talking about that? It's one thing if you have a nuanced position, or you're against US intervention, or you're an isolationist. But when you're repeatedly overlooking the vast atrocities on the left and nitpicking on the foibles of Ukraine, you're showing your cards. So look, I know that that was disorganized, and I think my emotion comes through. Um, but I'm going to continue to keep trying to do my best to draw the connections, to get better at learning who the players are, at pointing out the obvious connections. The Russians have billions and billions of dollars at their disposal. They're wasting $1 billion a day roughly in Ukraine. They're not going to bat an eye at spending billions of dollars to buy off podcasters, right? The chances that the Russians aren't trying to buy off podcasters is zero. And when they're successful at doing so, it's going to look like Jordan Peterson. It's going to look like Matt Taibbi. It's going to look like Tucker Carlson. It's going to look like Tulsi Gabbard. And yes, I'm accusing all of them of taking Russian money. They want to sue me for libel. Let's go through the discovery process. Let's do that. Let's open up the books. Plus, I got no money for you anyway, but you want to hit me with libel, you want to whatever, that's fine. Let's go through the discovery process. Let's look at your bank accounts. The first thing Trump will do in office is to drop the sanctions against Russia. The second thing he'll do is to rescind military aid to Ukraine. The third thing he's going to do is open the floodgates to Russian agents coming into the country, whether those be FSB agents, whether those be military agents, whether those be oligarchs and all of their dirty money. We fucked up bad. And the problem is America doesn't even know how badly we fucked up. If we don't focus on this, our system will become the Russian system. That's how it works. They force you into compromise. They force you into participation in the system so that you can't get out of it. They make everybody guilty. And so I'm going to continue to do my best to connect these dots, tighten this up and get it better. But, I've got to do something.